Sarah Goldman sat at the old piano in the community center and stared at the keys. Her hands shook a little as she touched the white keys with her fingertips. The piano was not very good, but it was all they had at the Jewish Community Center in Brooklyn. Sarah was 98 years old and had not played piano for 2 years now. Not since her husband Morris died and they had his funeral. The room was quiet except for the sound of people talking in the hallway outside. Sarah could hear children playing somewhere in the building. She pressed one key and then another. The sound was soft and a little out of tune, but it was still music. She had almost forgotten how good it felt to touch piano keys again. Sarah had learned to play piano when she was a little girl in Vienna before the war. Her parents had saved money to pay for lessons because they thought she was very good at music. Her teacher always said she had special hands for piano. But then the Nazis came to Austria and everything changed. Her family lost everything and had to run away. Sarah did not play piano for many years after that. She only started playing again when she was 70 years old. Her granddaughter Lisa had asked her to take lessons at the senior center. Sarah had said no at first because she thought she was too old and had forgotten everything. But Lisa kept asking and finally Sarah agreed to try. She was surprised that her fingers still remembered some of the music from when she was young now. Sarah pressed more keys and tried to remember a song by Chopin that she used to love. The notes came slowly at first and then a little faster. She made some mistakes but kept going. The music sounded lonely in the empty room, but also beautiful in a sad way. Sarah did not hear the door open behind her. She did not know that someone else had come into the room. She kept playing the Chopin piece and thinking about her childhood in Vienna. She remembered the apartment where her family lived and the window that looked out at the big river. She remembered her mother making dinner while Sarah practiced piano in the front room. The man who had come into the room was very old too. His name was David Rosenberg and he was also 98 years old. He used a walker to help him walk because his legs were not strong anymore. A young woman from the community center had brought him here because his grandson thought he should get out of his apartment more often. David had been coming to the community center for only 2 weeks. His wife Ruth had died 6 months ago, and he had been very sad and lonely since then. His grandson Michael kept telling him that he needed to be around other people. David did not really want to be around other people, but he came anyway because Michael worried about him. When David heard the piano music, he stopped walking. He knew that song. It was Chopin's Nocturne in F-flat major. David had learned that same piece when he was 16 years old in Warsaw before the war. He had been studying at the music school and wanted to become a concert pianist. His parents had worked very hard to pay for his lessons because they believed he had a gift for music, but then the war came and the Germans made all the Jewish people live in a small area of the city. David's piano was taken away along with everything else his family owned. He had to work in a factory making things for the German army. His hands that used to make beautiful music now had to do hard work just to stay alive. David had not played piano since the war ended. He had tried a few times, but it always made him too sad. He had gotten married to Ruth and they had children and grandchildren. He had worked in construction for 40 years building houses and buildings. His hands had become rough and strong, but he had never touched piano keys again. Now David listened to Sarah playing and felt something he had not felt for many years. The music was not perfect, but it was full of feeling. He could hear that the person playing had real emotion in their heart. David slowly walked toward the piano using his walker. Sarah heard footsteps behind her and stopped playing. She turned around and saw an old man with white hair and kind eyes. He was looking at her with an expression she could not understand. It was like he was seeing something from a long time ago. "Please don't stop playing," David said in a quiet voice. That was very beautiful. Sarah looked at him and felt something strange. This man seemed familiar even though she had never seen him before. There was something in his eyes that looked like her own eyes when she looked in the mirror. It was the look of someone who had lived through things that were hard to talk about. "I was just remembering," Sarah said. "I have not played much lately." "I know that song," David said. I used to play it when I was young. You play piano too? Sarah asked. David nodded. I used to play a long time ago. Sarah moved over on the piano bench. Would you like to sit down? David looked at the bench and then at Sarah. He had not sat at a piano with another person since he was a teenager, but something about Sarah made him feel safe. Maybe it was the way she had been playing with so much feeling. Maybe it was because she looked like she understood about having a hard life. David put his walker to the side and slowly sat down next to Sarah on the bench. His hands looked old and had spots on them from age. Sarah's hands looked the same way, but both of them had long fingers that looked like they were made for playing piano. I have not played with anyone in 75 years, Sarah said very quietly. David looked at her hands on the piano keys. Neither have I. They sat there for a moment without saying anything. Other people in the community center were doing their activities, but Sarah and David felt like they were the only two people in the world. The piano keys were waiting for them to make music together. Sarah put her right hand on the keys and played a few notes from the Chopin piece. David listened and then put his left hand on the lower keys. He played some notes that went well with Sarah's melody. The music was simple, but it sounded good together. Neither of them spoke while they played. They both had tears in their eyes, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of finding something they thought they had lost forever. Sarah woke up early on Tuesday morning and felt something she had not felt in a long time. She was excited to go somewhere. She had been thinking about David and their piano playing together for the whole week. Every day she had wanted to go back to the community center, but she was also scared. What if he did not come back? What if it had just been one special moment that could never happen again? Her daughter Rebecca came to pick her up at 10 o'clock. Rebecca was 68 years old and had gray hair, but she still treated Sarah like she was her little girl. Rebecca always worried that Sarah was too lonely since her father Morris had died. Are you sure you want to go to the community center again so soon? Rebecca asked as she helped Sarah get into the car. You just went there last week. Maybe you should take it easy. Sarah looked out the window and did not answer right away. How could she explain to Rebecca that she had found something at the community center that she thought was gone forever? How could she tell her daughter that playing piano with David had made her feel alive again in a way she had not felt for years? I want to go, Sarah said finally. There is a man there who plays piano. We played together last week. Rebecca looked surprised. A man you played piano with a man you just met, Mom? That seems a little fast, don't you think? Sarah almost laughed. Rebecca was worried about her 98-year-old mother dating someone. It is not like that, Rebecca. We just made music together. It was nice. When they got to the community center, Sarah felt nervous. What if David had decided not to come back? What if he had thought about it and decided he was too old to play piano with strangers? Sarah walked slowly into the main room where the piano was. David was already there. He was sitting in a chair next to the piano, and he looked like he was waiting for someone. When he saw Sarah, his face got brighter and he smiled. Sarah felt relief wash over her like warm water. I hoped you would come back, David said as Sarah walked over to him. I hoped you would be here too, Sarah said. David's grandson Michael was with him. Michael was about 45 years old and had the same kind eyes as his grandfather. Michael had been trying to get David to be more social since his grandmother Ruth had died. When David had told him about meeting Sarah and playing piano, Michael had been very happy. Grandpa has been talking about you all week, Michael said to Sarah. He even asked me to bring some of his old sheet music from home. Sarah looked at David with surprise. You kept sheet music from before, David nodded and looked a little embarrassed. I kept some things hidden away. I thought maybe we could try playing some real songs together instead of just making up music. Sarah and David sat down at the piano bench together. David opened a folder that had old yellow papers in it. Some of the pages were torn at the edges and the writing was faded, but Sarah could still read the musical notes. This is Mozart, Sarah said, looking at the first page. I used to play this when I was young. My teacher in Warsaw taught me this piece, David said. I was 16 years old and I thought I was going to be a famous piano player someday. Sarah looked at David's face and saw something sad in his eyes. What happened to your teacher? David was quiet for a moment. The Germans came to Warsaw in 1939. My teacher was taken away with many other people. I never saw him again. Sarah understood. She had lost people too during the war. Her parents and her 2 brothers had been taken away and she never saw them again either. For many years after the war, she could not talk about it without crying. I had a teacher in Vienna too, Sarah said. His name was Herr Müller. He was very kind to me. He said I had special hands for piano. What happened to him? David asked. I don't know, Sarah said. When the Germans came to Austria in 1938, everything changed very fast. My family had to leave our apartment. I never got to say goodbye to Herr Müller. David and Sarah began to play the Mozart piece together. Sarah played the main melody and David played the harmony parts. At first they made mistakes and had to start over a few times. But after a while their hands began to remember how to work together. Other people in the community center started to notice the piano music. An old woman named Mrs. Goldstein came over to listen. 2 men who were playing chess stopped their game and walked over to the piano. A group of women who were doing crafts put down their work and came to see who was making such beautiful music. Sarah and David did not notice that people were watching them. They were too busy remembering what it felt like to make music with another person. The Mozart piece had fast parts and slow parts. During the slow parts, Sarah felt like she was floating. During the fast parts, she felt like she was dancing even though she was sitting down. When they finished the Mozart piece, everyone who was watching started to clap. Sarah and David looked up and were surprised to see that they had an audience. Sarah felt her face get red. She was not used to people watching her play. That was wonderful, said Mrs. Goldstein. I have not heard piano music like that in many years. David looked at Sarah. Should we play another one? Sarah nodded. They played a piece by Chopin that was slow and sad but also beautiful. While they played, Sarah thought about her childhood in Vienna. She remembered sitting at the piano in her family's apartment while her mother cooked dinner. She remembered the smell of her mother's cooking and the sound of her father reading the newspaper. David was thinking about his own memories. He remembered his parents saving money to pay for his piano lessons. He remembered how proud they were when he played for them in the evenings. He remembered dreaming about playing in big concert halls for hundreds of people. When they finished the Chopin piece, Sarah had tears in her eyes. David saw her crying and felt his own eyes get wet. I had forgotten how good it feels to play with someone else, Sarah said. So had I, David said. I thought I would never feel this way again. The people who had been watching them started to go back to their own activities. Sarah and David sat at the piano for a few more minutes without playing. They both felt like something important had happened, but they were not sure what to say about it. Would you like to come back next week? David asked. Yes, Sarah said. I would like that very much. Sarah was making tea in her small kitchen when she heard the doorbell ring. She looked at the clock and saw that it was exactly 2 o'clock. David was always on time. She had invited him to come to her apartment because she wanted to show him her piano, and also because she felt ready to talk to him about things she had never talked about with anyone else. Sarah opened the door and saw David standing there with his walker. He had a small bag in his hand and he looked nervous. Sarah had never had a man visit her apartment since Morris died. She felt nervous too, but also excited. Come in, David, Sarah said. I just made tea. David walked slowly into Sarah's apartment and looked around. The living room was small but clean and bright. There were pictures everywhere of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. David could see that Sarah had built a big family after the war. The apartment smelled like flowers and old books. You have a beautiful home, David said. Thank you, Sarah said. It is not much, but it is mine. David saw the piano in the corner of the living room. It was small and old, but it looked well cared for. Is that your piano? My children bought it for me when I turned 80, Sarah said. They thought I should have music in my home again. David walked over to the piano and touched the keys gently. It has a nice sound, he said after pressing a few keys. Sarah brought the tea on a tray and they sat down on her couch. David put his bag on the floor next to his feet. Sarah waited for him to tell her what was in the bag, but he seemed too nervous to talk about it. "How long have you lived in this apartment?" David asked. 15 years, Sarah said. "Morris and I moved here after he retired. We wanted something smaller and closer to our daughter Rebecca." David nodded. "Ruth and I lived in the same apartment for 40 years. After she died, I thought about moving somewhere smaller, but I could not do it. Too many memories." Sarah understood. After Morris died, she had thought about moving too, but she could not leave the place where they had been happy together. "David," Sarah said carefully. "What is in your bag?" David looked down at the bag and then back at Sarah. "I brought something I have not shown to anyone for a very long time. Not even Ruth saw these." David opened the bag and took out a shoebox. The box was old and the corners were worn down. He opened it very carefully, like it had something fragile. "Inside, these are my music papers from before the war," David said. "I hid them when the Germans came to Warsaw. I thought they would be destroyed, but somehow I got them back after the war ended." Sarah leaned forward to look in the box. She could see old sheet music with yellow pages and some papers that had handwriting on them. The papers looked like they had been folded many times, and some had small tears in them. "I also wrote some music of my own," David said quietly. "I wrote songs when I was hiding during the war. It was the only way I could stay sane." Sarah felt her heart start to beat faster. "You wrote your own music?" David nodded. "There's one song I wrote when I was hiding in a basement for 3 months. I could not make any sound, but I could write music in my head. I wrote it down on a piece of paper I found." David took out a piece of paper that was more yellow than the others. The handwriting was small and careful. Sarah could see musical notes written in pencil. "I have never played this song out loud," David said. "I was afraid it would bring back too many bad memories." Sarah looked at David's face and saw that he was scared. "Would you like to play it now, with me?" David's hands shook a little as he held the paper. "I don't know if I can. We can try together," Sarah said. "If it is too hard, we can stop." They moved to the piano bench and David put the sheet music on the piano. Sarah looked at the notes and could see that it was a sad song, but also beautiful. It was written in a minor key, which made it sound lonely. "What were you thinking about when you wrote this?" Sarah asked. David was quiet for a long time. "I was thinking about my family, my parents and my sister. I was thinking about my piano teacher and all the music I thought I would never play again. But I was also thinking about hope. Even in that dark basement, I still believed that someday I would play piano again." Sarah felt tears start to come to her eyes. "I stopped playing after the war," she said. "For many years I could not listen to music at all. It reminded me of everything I had lost." "Why did you stop?" David asked. Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Because I felt guilty. How could I make beautiful music when such terrible things had happened? How could I enjoy anything when my parents and brothers were gone? It felt wrong to be happy." David understood completely. "I felt the same way. I thought music was for people who had not seen what we had seen. I thought it was too pure for someone like me." "But you kept your music papers," Sarah said. "I don't know why," David said. "I could not throw them away, but I could not look at them either. I just kept them hidden." Sarah put her hands on the piano keys. "Maybe we kept the music because part of us knew that someday we would need it again." David put his hands on the keys too. Together they began to play his composition. The music was slow and sad at first. Sarah could hear the loneliness and fear in the notes, but as they played the song got a little brighter. There was still sadness, but there was also something else. There was the sound of someone who had survived. As they played, Sarah began to cry. She was crying for her parents and brothers who had died. She was crying for all the years she had been afraid to play music. She was crying for the little girl in Vienna who had loved piano so much. David was crying too. He was crying for his family and his teacher and all the music he had missed. He was crying for the young man who had dreamed of being a concert pianist. He was crying for his wife Ruth, who had never heard him play, but they kept playing. The music filled Sarah's small apartment and seemed to push away all the sadness that had been hiding in the corners. For the first time in many years, both Sarah and David felt like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. When they finished playing, they sat in silence for a long time. They both felt like something important had happened, but they were not sure what to say about it. "Thank you," David said finally. "Thank you for trusting me with your music," Sarah said. David carefully put his composition back in the shoebox. "I think my music has been waiting for someone like you to help me play." Sarah smiled. "I think my piano has been waiting for someone like you to help me remember why I love music." Mrs. Chen was the director of the Jewish Community Center, and she had been watching Sarah and David play piano together for 3 weeks now. Every Tuesday they came and sat at the old piano and made beautiful music together. Other people in the center had started to gather around them when they played. Mrs. Chen had never seen anything like it. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Chen called Sarah at home. Sarah was surprised to get a phone call from someone at the community center. "Mrs. Goldman," Mrs. Chen said. "I hope you don't mind me calling you at home. I have an idea I want to talk to you about." Sarah felt worried. Maybe they were making too much noise when they played piano. Maybe other people had complained. "Is something wrong?" Sarah asked. "Oh no," Mrs. Chen said quickly. "Nothing is wrong. Actually, I want to ask you and Mr. Rosenberg to do something special. We have our annual fundraising dinner next month, and I was wondering if you two would consider playing piano for everyone." Sarah felt her heart start to beat very fast. "Playing for everyone? What do you mean?" "I mean a real performance," Mrs. Chen said. "We usually have someone come in to entertain our guests, but this year I think it would be wonderful if you and Mr. Rosenberg played some music. People have been talking about how beautiful your music is." Sarah sat down in her kitchen chair. She felt dizzy. "I don't think I can do that, Mrs. Chen. I have never played for so many people. I am too old and my hands are not good enough." "Your hands are perfect," Mrs. Chen said. "And you and Mr. Rosenberg make magic when you play together. Would you at least think about it?" Sarah said she would think about it, but she already knew the answer was no. She was too scared to play in front of a room full of people. What if she made mistakes? What if people did not like their music? What if her hands shook too much and she could not play at all? That Tuesday when Sarah met David at the community center, she told him about Mrs. Chun's phone call. David listened carefully and then was quiet for a long time. "What do you think?" Sarah asked. "I think I am terrified," David said. "I have not played for an audience since I was 16 years old. That was 82 years ago." "So you think we should say no?" Sarah said. David looked at the piano. "I don't know. Part of me wants to say no because I am scared, but another part of me thinks maybe we should try." Sarah was surprised. "Really, why? Because we have spent so many years being afraid," David said. "Maybe it is time to do something that scares us." Sarah thought about this. It was true that she had been afraid of many things since the war. She had been afraid to talk about what happened to her family. She had been afraid to play piano for many years. She had been afraid to make new friends. Fear had been like a heavy coat that she wore everywhere. "How many people would be there?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Chen said about 200 people, David said. Sarah felt sick. "That is too many people, David. I cannot play for 200 people." "Maybe we could ask Mrs. Chen if we could just play one song," David said. "Just one short song?" Sarah shook her head. "I cannot do it." "I am sorry, David, but I cannot." David understood. He was scared too, but something inside him was telling him that this might be important. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "Can I tell you something?" David said. "When I was young, I used to dream about playing piano for lots of people. I thought someday I would be on a big stage and everyone would clap for me. That dream died during the war, and I never thought about it again until now." Sarah looked at David's face and saw something she had not seen before. He looked hopeful. "You really want to do this?" Sarah said. "I think I do," David said. "I think my music has been waiting 82 years for this chance." Sarah was quiet for a long time. She thought about the little girl in Vienna who had loved to play piano. She thought about her teacher Herr Müller, who had said she had special hands. She thought about all the music she had kept locked inside her heart for so many years. If we did this, what would we play? Sarah asked. David smiled. We could play your favorite Chopin piece, and maybe my composition from the war, and maybe something else. What if we make mistakes? Sarah asked. Then we make mistakes, David said. We are not trying to be perfect. We are just trying to share our music. Sarah felt something changing inside her. The fear was still there, but it was getting smaller. What if people don't like our music? Then they don't like it, David said. But Sarah, I think they will like it. I think they will love it. Double quotes. Sarah thought about this for several minutes. David waited patiently for her to decide. Maybe we could try practicing like we are performing, Sarah said finally. Just to see how it feels. David's face lit up. You mean practice like there are people watching us? Yes, Sarah said. And if it feels too scary, we can tell Mrs. Chun no. They spent the next hour practicing their 3 songs. Sarah pretended there were people sitting in chairs around the piano. At first she felt very nervous and made several mistakes. But after a while she started to feel better. The music was the same beautiful music they always made together. How do you feel? David asked when they finished. Scared, Sarah said, but also excited. I have not felt excited about anything in a long time. So should we tell Mrs. Chun yes? David asked. Sarah took a deep breath. I think we should tell her yes. David reached over and took Sarah's hand. We can do this together. Yes, Sarah said. Together. The next day, David called Mrs. Chun and told her that he and Sarah would play at the fundraising dinner. Mrs. Chun was so happy she almost cried. She told David that this would be the most special performance the community center had ever had. Sarah spent the rest of the week feeling nervous and excited at the same time. She practiced piano every day in her apartment. She picked out a nice dress to wear. She told her daughter Rebecca about the performance, and Rebecca said she was proud of her. David also practiced every day. He had his grandson Michael drive him to the community center extra times so he could practice on the piano they would use for the performance. Michael was amazed at how much his grandfather had changed since he started playing music again. Grandpa, Michael said one day, you seem different, happier? David smiled. I feel like I found something I thought I had lost forever. What did you find? Michael asked. I found my music, David said. And I found a friend who understands my music. The night before the performance, Sarah could not sleep. She lay in bed, thinking about the next day. She was still scared, but she was also ready. She had spent too many years being afraid. Tomorrow she would be brave. The main hall of the Jewish Community Center was full of people. Sarah had never seen so many faces looking at her at one time. She sat next to David at the piano and felt like her heart was going to jump out of her chest. Her hands were shaking, and she could hear her own breathing. There were round tables everywhere with white tablecloths and flowers. People were still eating their dinner and talking quietly. Sarah could see her daughter Rebecca sitting at a table near the front with her husband and children. Rebecca gave Sarah a thumbs up and smiled, but Sarah could tell that Rebecca was nervous too. David's grandson Michael was sitting at another table with his wife and teenage daughter. Michael had brought a small video camera because he wanted to record his grandfather playing piano. He had never seen David play before tonight. Mrs. Chun walked up to the microphone on the small stage next to the piano. The room got quiet as people stopped talking and looked toward the front. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Chun said, tonight we have something very special for you. 2 of our community members are going to share some music with us. Please welcome Sarah Goldman and David Rosenberg. People started to clap, but it was polite clapping like at church. Sarah felt like everyone was staring at her. She wanted to run away. Her legs felt weak, and she thought she might fall down. David whispered to her, Sarah, are you okay? I don't think I can do this, Sarah whispered back. There are too many people. I can't breathe. David looked at Sarah's face and saw that she was very scared. He was scared too, but he could see that Sarah was about to panic. He had to help her. Look at me, Sarah, David said quietly. Don't look at them, just look at me. Sarah turned to look at David. His eyes were kind and calm. "We are not playing for them," David said. "We are playing for everyone who cannot be here tonight. We are playing for your parents and my parents. We are playing for your teacher Hermuller and my teacher from Warsaw. We are playing for everyone who loved music but never got to hear it again." Sarah felt her breathing slow down a little. David was right. This music was not about the people in the audience. This music was about remembering. "Are you ready?" David asked. Sarah nodded. She put her hands on the piano keys and David put his hands on the lower keys. They started with the Chopin piece that had brought them together. The Nocturne in E-flat major. At first Sarah's hands were still shaking and she missed a few notes. But as the familiar melody filled the room, she began to feel better. David's harmony was steady and strong. The music was beautiful even with the small mistakes. The room became completely quiet. People stopped eating and put down their forks. Even the little children stopped fidgeting in their chairs. Something about the music made everyone want to listen carefully. Sarah began to remember why she loved this piece so much. It reminded her of sitting at the piano in Vienna while her mother cooked dinner. It reminded her of her teacher saying she had special hands. It reminded her of being young and believing that music could make everything beautiful when they finished. The Chopin piece, the audience clapped much louder than before. Sarah could see that people were smiling and some were wiping their eyes. She felt a little braver. "That was wonderful," David whispered to her. "Are you ready for the next one?" The next song was a Mozart piece that they had practiced many times. This time Sarah's hands did not shake at all. She and David played together like they had been musical partners for years instead of just weeks. The Mozart was cheerful and bright and made people smile, but then came the third song. David's composition, From the War, the piece he had written while hiding in a basement. The piece he had never played out loud until he met Sarah. David put the old yellow paper on the piano. His hands trembled as he found the first notes. This song was different from the others. It was dark and sad and full of pain. But it was also full of something else. It was full of hope that refused to die. As they began to play, Sarah felt something happening inside her chest. The music was bringing up feelings she had kept buried for many years. She thought about her parents being taken away. She thought about her brothers who never came home. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep. David was feeling the same thing. As his fingers moved across the keys, he remembered the basement where he had written this song. He remembered being hungry and cold and afraid. He remembered thinking he would never see sunlight again. Halfway through the song, Sarah began to cry. Not quiet tears, but deep sobs that shook her whole body. She could not stop playing, but she could not stop crying either. The music was pulling everything out of her that she had tried to keep hidden. David saw Sarah crying and felt his own tears start to come. For 82 years he had kept his emotions locked away. But now, with Sarah beside him and this music filling the air, he could not hold back anymore. He began to cry too, and then he began to hum along with the melody. It was the first time he had sung anything since before the war. The audience watched in silence as these two old people poured their hearts out through music. Sarah's granddaughter started crying. David's grandson Michael wiped tears from his eyes and kept filming even though his hands were shaking. Then something amazing happened. Other people in the audience began to cry too. An old woman at table 3 thought about her husband who had died last year. A middle-aged man remembered his father who had never talked about the war. A teenage girl thought about her great-grandmother's stories. One by one, people throughout the room began to weep. Not polite tears, but real deep crying. The music had opened something in everyone's heart. It was like Sarah and David had given everyone permission to feel their sadness and their loss and their pain. When the song ended, the room was completely silent except for the sound of people crying and sniffling. Sarah and David sat at the piano, holding hands and crying together. They had shared something with this room full of people that they had never shared with anyone. For a full minute, nobody moved. Then, slowly, one person started to clap. Then another person. Then everyone was standing and clapping and crying at the same time. It was not normal applause. It was people saying thank you for sharing something so honest and real. Sarah and David stayed at the piano bench holding hands. They were both crying and laughing at the same time. They had done something they never thought they could do. They had taken their pain and their memories and their music and shared it with the world. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Sarah and David sat together in Sarah's apartment drinking tea. They were both exhausted but also happy. "I can't believe we did that," Sarah said. "I can't believe how it felt," David said. "I feel like something heavy has been lifted off my chest." Sarah smiled. "I think our music helped other people tonight." "Too." "Yes," David said, "I think it did." They had found their voices again, and in doing so they had helped others find theirs too.